Welcome to the Happiness Podcast. I'm Dr. Robert Puff. Why do we get upset? We can be having a perfectly fine day, and someone can cut us off on the road, and it ruins our day. Or sometimes we wake up in the morning, turn on the news, or get on our phones, see what's happening in the world, and all of a sudden we go into that dark place of despair. And it's amazing how quickly it can change. Like I said, things can be going really well, and then something happens, and all of a sudden, we have a very different affect going on inside of us. Our happiness, our peace, can turn to sadness or anger. And when it happens, it feels justified. We feel it's right to be upset. We feel these feelings that are pouring through our veins seem appropriate. But are they? That's the question we want to look at today. Because I'm going to argue one very important point today, and it's this. We aren't disturbed by the things that happen to us, but by the thoughts about these things that happen to us. And if we really think about this statement, that we're not getting upset because of what's happening, we're getting upset because of our thoughts about the things that are happening, we will see evidence of this all throughout our lives. It's our anniversary with the person that we love, and for some reason they forget. And it doesn't bother us at all. We just laugh about it and remind them and tease them. Other times, it feels like a blow to the heart, and we wonder if they really love us. Sometimes we apply for a job and we don't get it. We don't know why, but it's okay. There's a lot more places that we can apply. Other times we apply for a job, we don't get it, and it really challenges our sense of self, wondering if there's something wrong with us, and if this is perhaps the beginning of the end of our career success. Sometimes we go to the doctor, and when our labs come back, we get a call from the doctor's office asking us to give them a call tomorrow morning because they had something they want to talk to us about. We don't think about it, we just call the next day and find out what they wanted to share with us. Other times we get that same call, and we're incredibly panicky. We're thinking the worst things could be going on, wondering if perhaps this is the last year we'll be on the planet Earth. Sometimes it's 10 o'clock at night, and that's when our kids are supposed to be home. They're driving now, and when they don't get home at 10, we give them a call, and they don't pick up the phone, and we think, well, those silly kids, I hope they'll be home soon, and they're safe. Other times, that exact same event happens, and we're convinced that they're in a wreck. They've died, and our lives are going to be forever challenged because now we lost our child. You can probably tell that I could go on and on with examples of the exact same event interpreted in very different ways. Think of a more extreme case. You've been diagnosed with terminal cancer. There's very little they can do for you. Some people say, okay, I'm going to look into other options, but I'm glad I had the life I've had, and I'm going to really spend time with the people that I love and celebrate the life I have left to live. For others, it's horrible. They think about the pain that's ahead of them. They think about all the suffering that's coming and all the people that they're going to never see again. And they fall into this dark pit of despair that is so hard to come out of. Let me use a real life example to illustrate this point, how the way we see things and think about them so much matters. When I moved in the house that I live in now, I had a neighbor across the street, and I would only see her when she brought her trash out, and she was always in her pajamas. And I just never had a chance to talk with her because she never came out, never went anywhere, and she was probably in her early 50s. But one day the ambulance came, and I thought, I wonder what happened. And I learned from my other neighbors that she had lost her husband about a year ago, and she literally drank herself to death. She didn't see anyone. She didn't talk to anyone. She just stayed home and drank all day long until it killed her. My father, who was happily married to my mother, she died when he was 65 years old, and they had been really well married their entire life. Well, of course, at first it was hard for my father, but he wasn't going to give up. He decided to get out there and meet people, and he did start dating, and then he met this wonderful person. He married her, and they had many marvelous years together. So the question that we started with, why am I upset? That is a very good question. And what I've hoped we've learned through this talk is we aren't disturbed by the things that happen to us, but by the thoughts we have about these things. One person can be the exact same situation as another and be fine, and the other person can be miserable. It isn't the events that matter, it's how we think about them. So then we want to ask ourselves 3 really important questions. 1, should I have these thoughts? 2, are these thoughts accurate? And 3, are these thoughts helpful? The first one is, should I have these thoughts? Well, I've talked a lot about how I really enjoy traveling, and I do a lot of it. So, when I travel, I realize there's a chance that 1, my flight may be delayed, my flight may be canceled, and when I get there, my luggage may be lost or show up later. Those are just part of traveling. Let's say we travel to work every day. We know when we travel, sooner or later, there's going to be a really bad accident, and we're going to be sitting on the road for a long time until that accident clears. These are just part of traveling, whether to work or for enjoyment. So when it is one of those days where it's like, okay, something bad happened, my flight got canceled, or I'm stuck in very bad traffic, being frustrated by that is normal. But saying or having the thoughts like, this is unfair, why is this happening to me? Life is so unfair. This is just cruel. That's a silly thought, because of course, sooner or later, when we do certain things, bad things are going to happen. It's just inevitable. I mean, let's talk about love. We love to fall in love, but there's a high probability when we're dating that the person that we're dating probably won't be the person we're going to spend our life with. And then, when we get married, there actually, here in the U.S., is a 50-50 chance that that person that we walk down the aisle with won't be by our sides when we pass and die at the end of our lives. Because even if we make it all the way to the end of our marriage, our partner may die first. So when love ends, of course it's normal to grieve and be sad. But saying things like, or thinking things like, this is unfair, why did this happen to me? Life is so unfair. That's an unhelpful thought, because life is just that. It goes down certain paths that are out of our control, and saying that we aren't supposed to suffer and go through hard times is silly. We all, pretty much, sooner or later, are going to have bumps along the way. We're going to have health bumps, we're going to have financial bumps, we're going to have emotional bumps. Those are just part of life. How we navigate them is based upon what we think. But saying that we're not supposed to have them, that is a thought we probably shouldn't have. After we determine whether we should be even having these thoughts or not, then the next question we want to ask ourselves is, are these thoughts accurate? Let's say we're at university and we're hoping to go on to medical school, so we're majoring in biology. Well, on one of our chemistry tests, we get a B and we were hoping for an A. And then what we do is we start thinking, well, now that I got this B instead of the A that I really need, that completely ruins my chance of getting into medical school, and my life is over. Oh my goodness, I don't even know if I can live with this. I know this is an extreme example, but it's not a made-up example. There are people that get a bad score when they're hoping to get into a graduate school program, and because of that, they actually commit suicide. Where what they ought to say is, okay, I didn't do as well as I thought. Perhaps I need to study more for the next exam. Maybe I do need to consider going into a different field, that this isn't the best field for me. But to consider hurting yourself or saying your life is over because of one bad exam is silly. Pretty much everyone has a bad day or something goes wrong when they're on a path or journey towards achieving something. In love, it's the same way. Two people can be deeply in love, but they have an argument, they have a dispute over something, and that's all it is. But the thought may be, do they really love me? Is this the end of the relationship? No, it's just a disagreement. That's all it is. And so we have to challenge our thoughts and say, are the thoughts that I'm having right now accurate? And if they're not, then we need to change them. And then the third thing we need to do is say, are these thoughts helpful? And let's use an example of cancer. Let's say we go to the doctor and he or she diagnoses us with a cancer that we need treatment for. They're going to arrange chemotherapy and radiation. And both of these are going to have some side effects. Well, right now, we feel fine. We're enjoying our life. There's really nothing going on that's painful. And there's a lot to be happy about. Those are good thoughts. Yes, it is true that when we get that chemotherapy and when we start the radiation, we may lose our hair, we may get sick, we may get nauseous. A lot of things may happen, but they're not happening now. And thinking about what will happen, or what might happen in the future, is not very helpful for us right now. So why have those thoughts? Another very common one I see so often is people spend a lot of time keeping up with the news, and they hear about something happening across the world or even in a different city, but nothing remotely connected to them. And yet they start having thoughts of fear or anxiety of what if it were to happen to them? What would they do? How is this helpful? Being afraid of something that hasn't happened. It is far better always just to live our lives well and address what's before us. If there are things that we need to deal with, we will deal with them. But until it's that time, we are not going to give them our thoughts, because those thoughts create suffering. It's not the events that cause suffering, it's our thoughts that cause suffering. And once we realize that, we start paying a lot more attention to what am I thinking. Here's another little technique that I really like. When we're anxious, when we're fearful, when we're angry, we need to stop and ask ourselves, what thought is causing this sensation, this feeling in me right now, this negative feeling? And there'll always be a link. We're not just going to be angry for no reason. We're never going to be anxious for no reason. There's always a reason, something fueling it, something behind it. So we look and say, okay, what was I thinking about that caused me to increase my anxiety, my depression, my fear? Even people that struggle with clinical depression still have thoughts that are depressive. And if they fuel those thoughts, they're going to get worse. Our thoughts matter, and we have to be very careful with them. It is far better to steep ourselves in good, positive thoughts, but mostly just steeping ourselves in the present moment, what's happening right now, and enjoying that. I so often say, there's always something beautiful to be with right now. Be with that. Having far less thoughts, monitoring our thoughts, and being careful with our thoughts is the path to happiness. So when we are upset, let's ask ourselves these 3 very important questions every time. Should I be having these thoughts? Are these thoughts accurate? And are these thoughts helpful? Because now we know that we aren't disturbed by the things that happen to us, but about our thoughts of the things that happen to us. And when we realize that, we realize we have a lot more control over our lives. And we can, with work and effort, gain mastery over our thoughts and learn to live a more happy, harmonious life right here, right now. Thank you for joining me on the Happiness Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, please go to happinesspodcast.org. And until next time, accept what is, love what is.